Have you ever watched your life collapse like a wedding cake drop from 5 stories high? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Except the icing wasn't white, it was blood red. And the hands that pushed it were the people I trusted most, my fiance and my sister. I still remember the scent of gardenias in the air, the rustle of tulle as the dressmaker fluffed the hem one last time, and the way my heart raced not with nerves, but with something close to peace. I was ready. After years of trying to glue myself back together from the wreckage of past breakups, heartbreaks, and therapy sessions that scraped my soul raw, I had finally found someone I could trust. Or so I thought. Ryan was everything I thought I needed. Not flashy, not overly charming, just consistent, solid. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order, who showed up on time, who looked you in the eye when you talked, and made you feel like the only person in the room. I didn't fall for him all at once. It happened slowly, like watching a field turn golden in the late summer sun. 3 years we dated, 3 years of building a future, collecting little inside jokes, painting bedrooms together, splitting grocery bills and life dreams in equal measure. I used to wake up next to him and think, I made it. I finally made it. And Chloe, my younger sister, she was the wild one, the dazzling one, the girl who could walk into a room and bend it toward her like gravity. Growing up, I lived in her shadow. Not because I wasn't loved, I was. But when Chloe entered the picture, she sparkled so brightly it was hard not to squint. She was the first to kiss a boy, the first to sneak out, the first to get arrested for joyriding in our neighbor's golf cart when we were 16. But she was also the first to cry when our mom died, the first to hold my hand at the funeral. And I forgave her 1,000 things because she was my sister, because I thought we understood each other. I never imagined she'd be the one to destroy me. It was supposed to be the happiest week of my life. The venue was a dream. Napa Valley in late spring, sunlight pouring over the vines, the scent of rosemary and wildflowers in the breeze. I had spent months choosing every detail, handmade menus, custom lace cut from the veil my mother wore at her wedding, even a cake topper I found at a vintage shop that looked like something out of a storybook. Chloe was my maid of honor. She helped pick the playlist. She gave the toast at the rehearsal dinner. She hugged me and whispered, I'm so proud of you, with tears in her eyes. 3 days before the wedding, Ryan disappeared. At first, I thought maybe there'd been an accident. I called his phone, voicemail, I texted. Nothing. I called his office. They said he was on approved time off. I tried not to panic. But by the end of the first day, I knew something was wrong. I went from confusion to fear to fury, all within 24 hours. Friends tried to calm me down. My dad offered to hire someone to look into it. But then, just when my imagination had conjured every nightmare, car crash, kidnapping, hospital bed, I got a message from one of my old college friends. No words, just a photo. It was Ryan and Chloe on a beach somewhere, laughing, drinking from coconuts, her head on his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. I stared at it for 10 minutes before I let myself believe it was real. Then I threw up in the sink. 2 days later, Chloe texted me. One line. Sorry, it just happened. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just shut down. The wedding was canceled, obviously. The guests were told there had been a medical emergency. My father nearly had a stroke when he found out the truth. My aunt called Chloe a disgrace. My cousin tried to fight Ryan in a grocery store. Everyone took sides, except me. I vanished. I packed up my things, left California, and didn't tell a soul where I went. And that's how I started over. Alone, humiliated, but alive. What I didn't know back then was that this betrayal wouldn't be the end of my story, not even close, because exactly 1 year later, they showed up at my door, looking like ghosts, desperate, broken ghosts. And I was no longer the same woman they left behind. When I opened the door that afternoon, I thought maybe it was a delivery. I'd been expecting some new swatches for a client, deep emerald velvets, raw linens, and brushed brass samples for a luxury interior redesign I was doing. but instead of fabric and brown paper packaging, I got Chloe and Ryan. I didn't recognize them at first. I mean, I did, but only in the vaguest sense, like seeing someone you used to know from a dream. But now they looked faded, smudged around the edges. Ryan had lost weight, but not in a good way. He looked sunken, brittle, like if I tapped him, he might crack. Chloe. Her hair was shorter, choppy, and her eyes didn't sparkle the way they used to. She looked older, tired. Her makeup was wrong, like she'd put it on in a hurry or after crying. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small standing next to her. I didn't feel like the quiet sister or the forgotten one. I felt untouchable. "Hi," Chloe said, and her voice actually wavered, like she knew she had no right. I just stood there, stunned, not because I was speechless, but because I was calculating, wondering how long it had taken them to drive here, wondering how long they stood on the porch rehearsing what to say, wondering if this was some kind of sick joke. Then Ryan stepped forward. His voice was quieter than I remembered. "We wouldn't be here if we weren't desperate." There was a long silence, not tense, hollow, like even the air between us didn't want to carry their words. I opened the door wider, not out of kindness, but curiosity. I wanted to see what rock bottom looked like on the faces of the people who once shattered me. Inside, I didn't offer them drinks. I didn't ask how they'd been. I just let them sit on the small linen couch near the display shelf where I kept sample books in ceramic vases. I leaned against my desk, arms crossed. The room was exactly as I had designed it. Soft lighting, rich textures, calming colors. But the energy had shifted. They didn't belong here. Not in my space. Not anymore. Chloe cleared her throat. "We didn't plan to," she started. "You did," I cut in, calm as ever. "You planned enough to find out where I live." Her mouth snapped shut. It was Ryan who took over. We started a business. After everything, thought we could launch a travel app. Chloe had the idea, and I handled the back end. We got some investors at first. It seemed promising. But then the market changed. Chloe added quickly, like she still wanted to be the star of the sentence. We lost funding. The app crashed during launch. Then Ryan got laid off from his tech job. We burned through savings, credit cards. I sold my car. I stared at her. "So?" Chloe flinched just slightly. "We heard, through Dad, that you were doing well, that you started your own design studio, that you were featured in a magazine last month." That stung in a weird way. Not because it was untrue, but because it confirmed they'd been watching from the sidelines, keeping tabs. "We need help," Ryan said, looking directly at me. "A loan, just enough to stabilize. We're not asking for a gift." "And why would I help you?" I asked, not angrily, just genuinely curious. Ryan had the gall to say, "Because you've always been the strong one." I almost laughed. The strong one, as if that was some badge I'd earned by enduring their betrayal. I stood and walked over to my desk, picked up a Post-it note, wrote on it slowly, calmly. My hands didn't even shake. I folded it once and handed it to Chloe. "Here's my answer," I said. They looked confused, but they didn't open it right away. Maybe they thought it was a check, a referral, some lifeline from the sister they left bleeding on the floor. They walked out the door without another word. I closed it behind them and locked it with a sense of finality I didn't know I needed. Later, I imagined them standing in the car or in a parking lot, unfolding the note and reading the words I'd waited a year to give back to them. It just happened. The same line Chloe texted me as my life unraveled. "Revenge doesn't always need a loud scream. Sometimes it's quiet, it's sharp, it's exact." But what I didn't know then was that this wasn't the end of their intrusion into my life. Not even close. Because 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, and that letter changed everything. At first, I didn't even notice the letter. It came in a plain white envelope, tucked between a vendor catalog and a marketing flyer. No return address, just my name and handwriting I didn't recognize. I was halfway through sorting the day's mail. bills, fabric samples, a postcard from a client in Paris, when my eyes landed on it. Something about the way the ink curved, hesitant yet oddly familiar, made my stomach clench. I opened it with one of my brass paper knives and unfolded a single sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting wasn't Chloe's. It wasn't Ryan's either. It was our father's. Emily, I know you don't want to hear from me, and you have every right. But I'm writing because I think you deserve to know what's going on. Not just about Chloe and Ryan, but about the family. About what really happened last year. I stopped reading for a moment. My heart had kicked up, thudding loud in my chest. The words blurred for a second, and I had to sit down, the paper trembling in my hands. Dad had barely spoken to me since I left. He tried a few times, texts, a missed call on my birthday, but I never responded. Not because I hated him, but because his silence during the aftermath had been deafening. He hadn't defended me, hadn't shown up when I needed him most. And now, here he was, writing me as if he had some secret I'd missed. I found out about Chloe and Ryan before the wedding. That sentence hit like a slap. I didn't know the full extent, just that they'd crossed a line. I confronted Chloe. She cried, begged me not to say anything, said it was a mistake, that she was going to end it. I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. I thought if I gave her time, she'd do the right thing. I was wrong. I read that part over and over. He knew before everything exploded, before I stood in a white dress staring at a phone screen, watching my life turn to ash. By the time I realized it wasn't a fling, it was too late. I should have told you. I failed you, Em. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to understand. This family didn't fall apart because of you. It fell apart because we were too cowardly to stop it. I sat there for what felt like an hour, reading and rereading the letter, numb and then angry and then cold. It made sense now. Why Dad had avoided me afterward. Why he couldn't look me in the eye during the one phone call we did have. He hadn't just failed to protect me. He'd chosen silence. He watched it happen and hoped it would disappear on its own. I didn't cry. Not then. I just folded the letter neatly and placed it in the back of my planner, where I kept things I didn't want to forget, but couldn't bear to look at every day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing that last week before the wedding, how Chloe had stayed at my house, how Ryan kissed me on the forehead while helping with final guest counts, how my dad had given a toast at the rehearsal dinner, his voice shaky with emotion. All of it had been a lie layered on top of another lie. And I lived in it like a dollhouse, every wall made of cardboard and denial. But something deeper started gnawing at me, a question I hadn't asked until now. Why had they really come to me? Was it really just about the money? Or was there something else? The answer came the next morning. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my business email, when I noticed a flagged message in my spam folder. The subject line read, Chloe Andrews, credit inquiry. I clicked it. It was from a collections agency. Apparently, Chloe had listed me as a reference for a private loan they had defaulted on. I felt a fresh wave of disgust wash over me. Not only had she betrayed me, not only had she walked away with the man I was going to marry, but now she was dragging my name into her financial mess, hoping I'd be too unaware or too sentimental to notice. That wasn't desperation. That was entitlement. That was arrogance. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer now. One of the first things I invested in after starting my business. Because if there was one thing betrayal taught me, it was this: protect yourself, always. But the worst part wasn't the debt. It was the realization that they hadn't come to ask for help. They had come because they needed me to save them. And when I didn't, they tried to take what they could anyway. I thought I had finished the chapter when I handed Chloe that post-it. But now it was personal again. And this time I wasn't just going to write a message on paper. This time I was going to burn the whole damn book. Revenge was never part of the plan, not at first. For a long time after the betrayal, all I wanted was distance, space to breathe, to exist without being someone's afterthought. I wasn't trying to become a success out of spite. I was trying to survive. But something inside me shifted the moment I saw that Chloe had tried to use my name as a lifeline. That wasn't an accident. That was calculation. It made me realize she didn't just run off with Ryan. She tried to erase me, and when that didn't work, she came back hoping I'd be too soft to resist. But I wasn't soft anymore. I'd spent too many nights on the floor of a therapist's office, too many mornings rewriting my life from the ground up. And now I was sharp, controlled, unforgiving. The next day, I dug through an old box of wedding stuff I hadn't touched in a year. Most of it was gone. I'd thrown out the dress, donated the decorations, deleted the Pinterest boards. But there was one thing I'd kept tucked away: my wedding binder, the original one. The one where I'd poured a year of planning into each page, where every vendor and detail was neatly tabbed. I kept it not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of who I was before everything exploded. And tucked inside that binder, under a plastic sleeve labeled Venue, was something I'd completely forgotten about: a copy of the prenup draft. Ryan and I had discussed it early on. I'd brought it up, not because I didn't trust him, but because after years of therapy, I had finally accepted that love wasn't a guarantee against disaster. I wasn't rich, but I had savings, stocks from an old job, and a modest inheritance from my mother. Ryan had agreed, a little begrudgingly, but we'd never actually signed the final version because, he ran off 3 days before the wedding. But the draft still existed, with signatures missing and the financial disclosures attached. It got me thinking, what if I wasn't the only one who had kept receipts? That night, I started making calls, not to confront, not to accuse, just to ask quiet questions. The first call was to an old mutual friend, someone who'd been invited to the wedding but never picked sides when the fallout happened. I asked if she'd heard from Chloe lately. She hesitated, said yes, then added something that caught my attention. She mentioned something about a lawsuit. Some guy suing their company. Said it wasn't a big deal, but she sounded nervous. The second call was to a contact I had at a boutique law firm, someone I'd worked with for a branding project. I asked them, just casually, if they could look into public filings involving Chloe or Ryan's business. They called back the next morning. Turns out, the failed startup wasn't just a bad investment, it was a disaster. Not only had they defaulted on loans, but they were also being investigated for misusing investor funds. Apparently, Ryan had moved some of the company's budget into personal expenses, including a lavish vacation to Mexico just a week before my canceled wedding. Mexico, it clicked. The trip they disappeared to, it wasn't some spontaneous escape. It was funded with company money, money that wasn't theirs to spend. I stared at the report, pages of numbers and transfers and emails. I felt sick, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed what I had always feared deep down. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They were reckless, greedy, and now criminally negligent. I could have walked away, thrown it all in the metaphorical fire, and moved on. But something in me whispered, not yet. I printed the documents, put them in a sleek, unmarked folder, and I mailed it to one place I knew they still visited every Sunday: our father's house. I didn't include a note, no explanation, just the facts. I wanted them to open it over coffee, maybe after some pathetic attempt to mend family ties. I wanted them to feel the blood drain from their faces, to know someone had seen. The silence after that was delicious. No calls, no texts, no follow-up letters. For a week, I heard nothing, until I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to the message, half expecting a creditor or an old client. But it was Chloe. Her voice was different, rushed, edged with panic. "I know it was you. You think you're clever, Emily, but you don't understand what you've done. This isn't a game. I listened to that message 5 times, and then I deleted it. Because she was wrong, I understood exactly what I was doing, and I wasn't done yet. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to control. Not peace, not closure, but control. The kind of quiet, simmering power that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start making it yourself. I didn't feel proud of what I'd done. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just felt sharp, focused, like a blade finally honed to its purpose. I went back to work that week with more clarity than I'd had in months. My design studio had picked up 3 new clients, and I poured myself into their projects with laser precision. The studio was my temple now, my proof that I could rebuild a life from the rubble of betrayal. Every piece of fabric I pinned, every vision board I laid out was a reminder. I was not the broken woman who'd been left behind. And yet, in quiet moments, the memory still tried to creep in. Sometimes when I walked home from work, I'd catch the scent of rosemary in the wind and think of the candles we were supposed to use at the wedding. Or I'd hear a song in a coffee shop, one of those generic acoustic covers, and suddenly I'd be back in Ryan's truck, his hand on my thigh, promising forever. But the difference now? I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just let the thought come. And then I let it go. 2 weeks after I mailed the documents to Dad's house, I got an unexpected package at the studio. No name, no sender, just a small black box wrapped in butcher paper. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me wondered if it was another dig, some pathetic attempt to scare me. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a single object, the engagement ring. My ring. The same one Ryan had proposed with. Simple, vintage, with a small sapphire in the center instead of a diamond. My mother's birthstone. It wasn't expensive, but it had meant something to me once. And now, here it was, returned like a library book someone forgot to burn. I turned it over in my fingers, looking for a note, a message, anything. There was nothing, just the weight of metal and memory, cold in my palm. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't closure. It was guilt, or fear, or both. Later that evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We're selling the apartment, leaving the state. We won't bother you again. I hope that's enough." That was it. No name, no apology, not even a breadcrumb of remorse. Just a weak attempt at surrender. A final admission that they'd lost. I didn't respond. I didn't even save the number. Instead, I placed the ring in a small dish on my desk, not as a keepsake, but as a symbol, a warning. Proof that silence can be louder than screaming, that walking away with your head high is sometimes more devastating than throwing a punch. Still, I couldn't ignore the restlessness building in me. Because the truth is, even after all of it, the lies, the betrayal, the chaos, I wasn't done processing what it had made of me. I had become someone else, someone harder, sharper, someone who didn't trust easily anymore. And that realization hit hardest when, a few weeks later, I met someone. His name was Marcus, a marketing consultant I'd hired for a rebrand. Kind, curious, steady, nothing flashy, nothing manipulative. The kind of man who waited for my sentences to finish and remembered the name of my dog, even though I only mentioned him once in passing. But even as we shared lunches, brainstormed campaigns, and laughed over ridiculous brand pitches, I could feel it. This wall inside me that refused to lower. Every compliment felt like a trap. Every question, a setup. I'd catch myself scanning his eyes for dishonesty, analyzing his pauses, waiting for the moment he'd reveal some hidden motive. He didn't, not once. But still, I kept my heart in lockdown. One afternoon, we were reviewing mood boards, and he made an offhand comment about vulnerability, how it's the key to real connection in marketing. I laughed, not at the idea, but at myself, because I hadn't let myself be vulnerable in over a year, and I wasn't sure I knew how anymore. After he left, I sat alone in the studio, staring at the ring in its dish, the glow of the late afternoon sun making the sapphire glint just slightly. I whispered, barely audible, "What did they turn me into?" Because that was the real betrayal, wasn't it? Not just that they took my fiancé, not just that they humiliated me, but that they made me afraid to trust love again, that they rewired my instincts until suspicion felt safer than hope. And yet, a part of me deep down still wanted to try, still believed there might be something on the other side of all this ruin. But I knew I couldn't reach it until I faced the last piece of the story. There was one more person I hadn't confronted, and I was finally ready to hear what she had to say. I hadn't spoken to my father since the day I left town. After the scandal broke, he tried to play peacemaker, offering bland reassurances like family's complicated and people make mistakes. But when your daughter runs off with your other daughter's fiance, mistake doesn't quite cover it. I needed more than diplomacy. I needed someone to say, this was wrong and you didn't deserve it. He never said that. So I cut ties, moved out of state, rebuilt, and for the most part I kept him out of it. But now with Chloe and Ryan supposedly skipping town and the ring sitting like a dead weight in my studio, something tugged at me, a final loose thread. I didn't want his apology. I didn't even want his approval. I just wanted truth. So that Saturday, for the first time in over a year, I drove back to my childhood home. It was strange seeing it again. The same chipped paint on the porch rail, the same wind chimes made of old keys that my mom had hung years ago. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, quieter, like a memory that had dulled with time. He opened the door before I even knocked. I could tell he'd been waiting. His eyes looked older, not just aged, but tired, like he'd spent the past year walking through fog and was only now starting to see shapes again. "Emily," he said, barely above a whisper. I stepped inside without speaking. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where I'd once practiced wedding signature designs, scribbling Emily and Ryan in flourishes across napkins. That memory made my stomach flip, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. He poured us both coffee, though neither of us drank it. The silence sat heavy between us until I finally broke it. "You got the package," he nodded slowly. "Yes." "And?" He hesitated. Then, "I didn't know it was that bad. I thought they were just irresponsible, not criminal," I finished for him. He rubbed his hands over his face. "I should have seen it. I saw how Ryan looked at Chloe at Christmas, the year before everything happened. I thought I was imagining things. I didn't want to believe it. That stung. So you saw it coming and said nothing." "I didn't know, Emily. I was scared to cause a scene. I let that sit. Cowardice disguised as civility. That was his specialty. A lifetime of keeping the peace at the expense of justice. I used to think that made him wise. Now, I saw it for what it was." "Did you help them?" I asked. "After the wedding?" His eyes flickered. "I let them stay here. A few days. They said they were confused, regretful. Regretful enough to ask for money?" He looked ashamed. "They tried. I didn't give them any. I knew better." A long pause. Then I asked the question that had burned in me for a year. Why her? His eyes met mine. And for the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a man who had no answers. "I don't know," he said. "Chloe always needed attention. Ryan, maybe he liked being wanted. Maybe he liked being chosen by her. But you—" He paused, his voice shaking. "You've always been the strong one, Em. I think they knew they couldn't break you, so they tried to replace you. Replace me." That was the phrase I hadn't been able to find. The thing I hadn't let myself say out loud. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd tried to be me, to take the life I built and wear it like a costume. And when it didn't fit, they blamed me for it. I stood up. I didn't need anything more from him. "Goodbye, Dad." He looked like he wanted to reach for me, to fix something unfixable. But I didn't give him the chance. I walked out, down the porch steps, back to my car, the wind chimes clinking behind me like broken laughter. That night, I sat in my apartment and opened the box with the ring again. I held it for a long time, not because I missed what it represented, but because I wanted to say goodbye to the version of myself that once believed in it. Then I walked to the balcony, held it over the edge, and let go. It didn't shatter. It didn't explode. It just landed with a faint metallic ping on the sidewalk below, where it blended with the ordinary world like the ordinary lie it had always been. 3 days later, I saw Marcus again. We were in a meeting, going over final concepts for the studio rebrand. He complimented a mood board I'd put together, something delicate and bold and unapologetic. "You're not afraid of strong lines," he said. I looked at him, really looked, and I smiled. "I used to be," I said. "Not anymore." And for the first time in over a year, I thought, maybe, just maybe, I'm ready. But just as I was starting to let that hope settle in, a familiar name popped up in my inbox. Not Chloe. Not Ryan. Worse. The subject line read, "Urgent. Legal inquiry regarding your studio branding," and the sender, a law firm. My heart froze because I had a bad feeling. They weren't gone. Not even close. At first, I stared at the email, convinced it had to be a mistake, some phishing scam, maybe a typo. But the firm's name was real, one I recognized from a billboard I'd passed more than once downtown. A mid-tier legal office, not some shady operation. My pulse thudded in my ears as I clicked open the message. It was short, cold, professional. "Dear Miss Carter, we are contacting you on behalf of our clients Chloe Jameson and Ryan Bennett regarding a potential intellectual property dispute connected to the brand identity and naming of your design studio, C+R Studio. Our clients allege prior verbal agreements and joint conceptual development preceding the current registration of the business. Please be advised that our clients are seeking acknowledgement and potential financial compensation. Kindly respond within 7 business days. Sincerely, Benjamin Keller, SQ." I blinked. Once? Twice? Then I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out more like a scoff, dry and hollow and tinged with something sharp. C+R Studio. I hadn't even remembered what the original initials stood for. I'd renamed everything after the wedding fallout, but had kept the legal entity under the same LLC. Mostly out of convenience. C for Chloe, R for Ryan. Back when I thought we were building something together. Back when I was naive enough to believe we were all on the same team. They had the gall to come after me for it now? I sat back, trying to process what this was. Desperation? Revenge? One last grasp at something they thought they could still take from me. I knew I was in the right. I had the receipts, every invoice, every branding draft, every official filing dated long after they disappeared to Mexico. But that didn't mean they wouldn't make trouble, drag things through court, waste time, energy, money. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to wear me down. It was pathetic. And it was working, because it got under my skin. The thought of their faces, smirking, smug, believing they had some right to my success, it made me sick. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but I did pour myself a glass of wine, close my laptop, and sit in the quiet until the sun set behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the floor of my studio. For days, I debated whether to respond myself or hire a lawyer. I could afford it, sure, but I hated the idea of spending one more dollar, one more second of my life on those 2 leeches. Marcus noticed something was off the next time he stopped by. "You okay?" he asked, his tone low and genuine. I almost brushed it off, almost. But something about the warmth in his voice cut through the armor I didn't realize I'd rebuilt. "Chloe and Ryan sent a lawyer after me," I said. "They're trying to take credit for the studio's name. Can you believe that?" He didn't laugh. He didn't gasp. He just looked at me, steady and sure. "Of course they did," he said. "You're thriving, and people like that don't know how to build, only how to steal." That landed deeper than I expected, because that's what it always came down to. They weren't creators, they were imitators, parasites, feeding off anything with life in it, draining it dry, then crying victim when there was nothing left to take. And maybe, for the first time, they'd realized I was no longer a source. I wasn't their prey anymore. I hired a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Dana, who looked at the case and snorted on the spot. "This is the weakest claim I've ever seen," she said. "It'll be dead before it breathes." Still, she filed the proper responses, drafted a cease and desist of our own, and sent them a clear message, pursue this and you'll pay real costs. It took less than a week for the law firm to reply with a one-line retraction. Our clients are no longer pursuing the matter. Just like that, no apology, no explanation. But it didn't matter. I had won again. Not with vengeance, not with revenge porn or ruined reputations, but with boundaries, with power, with the kind of strength they never imagined I'd find. I sat at my desk that evening, the city glowing outside the window, and finally, felt something close to peace. Chloe and Ryan were gone. Their smear campaign had failed. Their final grasp at control had dissolved into silence. But what surprised me most was how little I cared. Because the story was no longer about them. It was about me. And I wasn't the woman who lost her fiancé anymore. I was the woman who lost everything and came back stronger. But just when I thought the chapter was closed for good, a letter arrived, not from them, from someone I hadn't thought about in a long, long time. And this one changed everything. It arrived on a Thursday, a thick white envelope with no return address, just my name, written in that perfect cursive I hadn't seen in over a decade. My father's handwriting. I hadn't spoken to him since the wedding fell apart. After Ryan and Chloe ran off, my family fractured in every direction. Dad had tried to stay neutral, but his silence felt like betrayal. I moved away, built my life without him, without any of them. Inside was a letter, handwritten, no apologies, no explanations, just facts. He told me Chloe and Ryan were being investigated for fraud. Apparently, the startup they'd launched had roped in several investors, including one of my father's old friends. Turned out, Ryan had forged projections, inflated numbers, and misrepresented their tech capabilities. Chloe had signed off on every document, claiming to be head of marketing. The house they were living in wasn't even theirs. It was collateral for a business loan. And now, both of them were facing legal action. Civil lawsuits, even criminal charges. I reread the letter 3 times, not out of shock, but out of the quiet satisfaction of a storm finally reaching land. It wasn't my doing. I hadn't orchestrated it. I hadn't leaked anything or stirred the pot. The truth had simply caught up to them, just as it always does. And yet, I felt it all the same. That sense of justice snapping into place like a puzzle piece I'd stopped searching for. I followed the case quietly, through press clippings and whispers in industry circles. A small tech news site ran a piece titled Golden Couple or Professional Grifters: The Fall of Chloe Jameson and Ryan Bennett. Their photos were there, pale and tight-lipped, walking out of court, trying to hide behind sunglasses that couldn't mask their shame. Investors pulled out, lawsuits mounted, their reputation was shredded in weeks. And as their world crumbled, mine kept rising. My studio was expanding. I opened a second location in Seattle. I was invited to speak at a design summit in Berlin. For the first time, people weren't just hiring me for my taste. They were hiring me for my story. Resilience had become my brand. And authenticity? That was the currency no one could fake. One day, about 6 months after the letter, I got a message from an old family friend, someone who used to babysit Chloe and me when we were kids. Thought you'd want to know, your sister's living back with your dad. Ryan's gone. She's out of work. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She'd finally become what she always feared: invisible, ordinary, unremarkable. The spotlight had moved on, and it wasn't coming back. And Ryan? Word was he'd fled to avoid litigation, burned every bridge, ran out of charm, and disappeared into the dust of his own lies. I saw my father again, eventually. He reached out, carefully, hesitantly. We met for coffee, talked about neutral things at first. Then he cleared his throat and said, "You were right. About them." I didn't gloat. I just nodded. "I know." "Your mother would be proud of you," he added quietly. That's when the tears came. Not from grief, not from pain, but from something deeper, the release of everything I'd carried. And then, as we stood to leave, he handed me a small box. "It was your mother's. She wanted you to have it for your wedding." Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, simple, elegant, still shining. It no longer made me ache. It made me feel whole. Now, I live by the ocean. The studio runs itself most days. I still work, still create, but with balance, peace. My mornings start with coffee on the balcony. My evenings end with books and candlelight. And sometimes, when I look at the waves crashing against the shore, I remember the woman I used to be, torn apart, humiliated, broken. But she's gone now. In her place stands someone who lost everything and learned to build something better, herself. As for Chloe, the last thing I ever heard about her came from a mutual acquaintance. She tried to launch a YouTube channel about healing and mindfulness. It flopped. People remembered. The internet never forgets. She sent me one last email, no subject line, just a single sentence. I didn't know what I was doing. I never opened it. I just marked it as spam and smiled, because closure isn't always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's just not needing to look back, not even once. And if she ever wonders how I feel about everything she did, I hope she remembers the note I handed her that day. It just happened. Funny how those words age differently on my lips. She used them to destroy me. I used them to bury her. Some people fall, others rise. But me, I learned how to burn quietly and let the ashes build an empire.